So, good morning everyone and welcome to this Legal Aid New South Wales law webinar about the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme currently operating in New South Wales until 30 June 2022. My name is Kerry Wright and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. I'm here today with Sue Ellen Hills, who's a lawyer with the Legal Aid New South Wales Civil Law Service for Aboriginal Communities, and Joshua Scotland from the Legal Aid New South Wales Community Legal Education team. And Josh has also worked with the Class Act team with Sue Ellen. Hi, Sue Ellen. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Kerry.
So before we start, I want to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional owners and custodians on whose land we're broadcasting from today, and to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar today or viewing the recording. So this webinar is aimed at people who work with stolen generations survivors. So if you're a stolen generations survivor yourself and would like to get advice directly from a lawyer about your situation, you have the option of logging off now and speaking to a lawyer in Class Act directly. And the phone number which is up on the slide now is 1800 793 017 or 02 9219 5057. Today we'll be talking about compensation for members of the stolen generations. I acknowledge this topic is sensitive. If at any time during the webinar the information triggers something or brings back bad memories, it's up to you whether you stay. You can choose when you want to leave, and you can come back to the webinar as it's being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So here's an overview of what we're going to cover today in the webinar. So we're going to look at why reparation is available, what reparation is available, and which members of the stolen generations can get the reparations. There's two types. Who's eligible for reparations, how to apply for reparations, what happens if you get refused, which organisations can help members of the stolen generations apply for reparations, the impact that this will have on Centrelink payments, social housing, and any fines or debts that members of the stolen generations may have, where you can refer clients for help with any other legal or financial issues, and where you can refer clients for help with healing and counselling. So, Sue Ellen, I'll bring you in now first. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Civil Law Service for Aboriginal Communities?
Thanks, Kerry. So my name's Sue Ellen Hills. I'm one of the solicitors who works in Classic. So Classic has around 20 staff, and that has solicitors, legal support officers, paralegals, project officers, and financial counsellors. So it's a collaborative team. Because it's a holistic service, we try to deal with all of our clients' civil legal needs. Around half of our staff are Aboriginal, so this really assists and informs us in providing culturally appropriate services. We work really closely with other Aboriginal specific services to ensure that we are providing the right service. We travel to over 20 locations in regional New South Wales.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. And how are you providing your service now to across the state with the COVID restrictions?
Yeah, so we've worked really hard. We're still doing our outreach clinics, but we're doing them via telephone. We work really closely with lots of services in our outreach community. So we've been able to facilitate it through that way. A lot of our ongoing clients, we know them well, and we still keep in contact. So things are moving. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All right, so now let's find out about the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme.
Sure. So the New South Wales government decided in July 2017 that some members of the stolen generations can apply for reparations. We'll talk a bit more about exactly who can get these reparations in our next slide. The main message of today is that you can call Legal Aid, and that's for both clients and community workers to get help. and to help the stolen generations apply for these reparations. If your client isn't sure if they are eligible, we really encourage everyone just to give us a call. So if you made an application for reparations and the government agree, they will give the applicant $75,000 and an extra $7,000 for funeral costs. The Department of Aboriginal Affairs will also be giving money for healing projects. So you can, if you're interested in that, you can speak directly to the New South Wales Department of Aboriginal Affairs and their number, which will be on the handouts at the end, but it's 1800 019 998, or you can go directly to the website to find out about things like that.
Okay, thanks, Sue Ellen. So now we'll look at who is eligible.
Okay, so the straight up eligibility guidelines for payments to living. So you have to be alive at the time of application, stolen generation survivors. So they were people who were removed by, committed to, or otherwise came into the care of the New South Wales Aborigines Protection or Welfare Boards under the Aborigines Protection Act 1909, up until the Act was repealed on the 2nd of June 1969. And that's a really important date. Because if the removal occurred after that date, they may not be eligible. Unfortunately, descendants aren't eligible under the scheme, but if your family member was alive on the 2nd of December 2016, which is the date that the New South Wales government announced the establishment of the Funeral Assistance Fund, then get in contact with us because you may be eligible for assistance under that funeral fund scheme. Eligible stolen generation survivors can choose to receive that funeral assistance payment either at the same time as their reparations payment, or they can defer the payment and nominate a person to receive this payment at the point that it's required. So there's just some important parts to note. The guidelines, they're not binding, but our experience is that there are certain claims, as an example where the Aborigines Welfare Board weren't involved in the removal of the child, or someone was removed after that 2nd of June 1969, may not be eligible for the scheme. And also Aboriginal Affairs can depart from the guidelines, and this is really important, if it's satisfied that it is in the interest of justice and equity to do so. So that allows us some scope to do submissions and some arguments for people who may not think that they are eligible or may be just on the outside. So we always encourage people to get in contact with a lawyer and seek some advice before they think they're not eligible.
Okay, thank you. And so, Sue Ellen, can people apply themselves or do they need help from a lawyer?
Look, clients can definitely apply themselves or with the support of a worker. Aboriginal Affairs have made it as simple and trauma-informed as possible. It's, I think it's a 3-page application form. For many clients, you know, they know that they were stolen. They know that the AWB removed them from their family. So for those people, they feel confident enough that they can fill in the form, and normally for them, they will be eligible under the scheme. But in broad terms, the clients put the application in, they fill it in, their name, their date of birth. If they recall the place that they were taken to, they can put that down. Any other names that they may be known from, which is important too. Aboriginal Affairs will then do a record search. So they go through all of the records that they have to see if they meet the eligibility. If they do, the payment will be granted and the client will be made aware of that. But the thing is that we're really trying to get the point across is that for many other clients, it's not as straightforward. And you may actually need a solicitor to help to make an argument around the fact that they were actually removed. Sometimes we might do a much wider search for documents. We might be in contact with family and get statements for them. Another thing as well is that we're doing lots of these applications. So we're also becoming really familiar with how the Aborigines Welfare Board worked. Sometimes knowing a name mentioned by the client who they record being around is the information that we need, and that can be enough to get them successful. Unfortunately, there are some cases where people were removed by the Child Welfare Board and not the Aborigines Welfare Board. There is still sometimes an argument to be made in that. So that's why, again, we always say it's great to get in contact with a solicitor to see how they can help you, because not everyone falls squarely within the eligibility criteria.
Okay, thank you. All right, well now, can you tell us why it's important to understand about the Aboriginal Apprenticeship Scheme?
Yeah, look, this is really interesting. A lesser known aspect of the stolen generations is that there were people who were forcibly sent away from their families by the AWB to do domestic work or work as a farmhand or other work. And these people may actually be eligible under the scheme. So sometimes people who were in this situation may not actually consider themselves to be members of the stolen generations, as they weren't taken to one of the homes, but they still can be eligible under the scheme. For these people, often the children didn't receive any wages, and they received sort of like a small percentage, like a pocket money type of thing. And that's actually now called stolen wages. These wages were put into government trust accounts. There may actually be no records of this. It was just sometimes an informal way that things were done. We have been able to do a few of these claims, and for them, a statement from the client, either with the stat dec, is preferable. One thing to note though, if the client was sent to work but actually didn't leave the reserve or station, then they aren't likely to be eligible. But the thing is, if people had some sort of involvement, they think, in their lives, it's really important to get in contact with us and see what we can do to help.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now, Sue Ellen, can you tell us who isn't eligible for the reparations scheme?
Okay, so children of stolen generation survivors are not eligible. Usually, if you were removed after 1969, so that's the 2nd of June, 1969, many parents were forced by the AWB or the Child Welfare Department to give their consent for the children to be taken. So where this happens, and we can show that in the background there was AWB involvement, we can try to make an argument that these people should also be eligible. But if we can't show that the parents were forced to give up their children by AWB involvement, it's unlikely that we'll be able to find those people are eligible. However, we encourage everyone to come to us for advice, because it's not always straightforward.
Okay, thank you. So now can you take us through the application form and the process involved?
Okay, yeah, so the form, as I said, is reasonably straightforward, and Aboriginal Affairs have tried to make it as trauma-informed as possible. So you just need to fill in the form: name, age, date of birth, address. If you have someone who you want to be like a nominee, so someone that Aboriginal Affairs will contact. For clients that we are assisting with the application, will normally be that person. So if Aboriginal Affairs have any questions, they can get back to us instead of back and forth with the client. You need to have 2 copies of ID. So that's like a birth certificate, passport, driver's license, pensioner card, Medicare card, healthcare card, or a bank account card. We are also aware that for many Aboriginal people, they do have difficulties with ID, especially birth certificates. So just wanted to let you know about the Pathfinders program. They run the National Aboriginal Birth Certificate program, and there is a link at the end of this webinar to how you can access that.
Great, thanks. And I think this next slide is about the process, so through that.
Okay, yeah. So after you put the application form in, the Department of Aboriginal Affairs will check all of the government records to see if they can confirm that you were removed. So if the records are unclear or they need more information, they'll contact you. Or if you have had us down as a nominee, they'll be in contact with us. It's important because sometimes I think these are taking sort of 12 months sometimes. It's a long period of time. So if you change your address and you don't have your lawyer down as a nominee, it's really important you let Aboriginal Affairs know about new contact details. Some other things to think of: if you are sick or you have a reason to think that your application should be given priority, let them know. That kind of information will be wanted to be highlighted with Aboriginal Affairs. So if Aboriginal Affairs decide to refuse your application and not give you reparations, you can ask for a review. So this means that you're asking Aboriginal Affairs to look at your application again. If this happens, we would strongly suggest someone get some legal advice to see whether there's more information that can be gathered to assist the client with that. So that can either be legal aid or your community legal centre.
Okay, so let's look at that now, how the Class Act team at least can help your clients in those situations.
Yeah, so look, we will do lots and lots of record searches. We will definitely contact the Department of Communities and Justice and get care leaver records. Sometimes we might actually need to do a GIPA application for that because we need a broader, there are sometimes some child welfare that hasn't actually made it through with their care leavers record. So we will do a GIPA to Communities and Justice if we need to. Aboriginal Affairs have a service called the Family History Record Search. So whilst that's often done for the client, we will also request that it's done for their parents and their grandparents, so we can have a bigger idea of what actually the involvement may have been with that family from AWB. And sometimes you can pick up things in parents and grandparents family record search. If someone had been adopted, then we will request through the Supreme Court their adoption records. And what we will also do, sometimes if there's nothing coming up in any of those documents, we will make an application to some of the homes that they may have been placed in. So a lot of the religious homes like the Salvation Army or Catholic Church. And sometimes you can see in that, sometimes in their admission records, there's a note that talks about AWB, that type of thing. And they can be actually really informative. I did one earlier this week and came across a letter in that went with the child as to why they were placed in that home, but there had been nothing that had come up in child welfare documents. So we just look everywhere we possibly can to try and find some records. There were some very good note keepers who wrote a lot of stuff down, and that's what we're trying to find.
Deciphering their handwriting might be one of the main challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, and helping clients apply for a review, how do you do that?
Yeah, so look, that's something that we are starting to do more and more of. What we will do though, if we know that Aboriginal Affairs are going to refuse the application, we'll ask them to hold off making what's called a determination. So that's the decision. When we do that, so sometimes a client may have put the application in themselves. So we'll ask Aboriginal Affairs to hold off. We will get the application, have a look at it, get some further statements from the clients, gather documents, as we said earlier, maybe statements from family, talk a bit more about their recollection, and then we will resubmit that. So I think as of about now, the Classic team have done about 100 reviews, and we're starting to learn. The more that we do, the more that we learn about the type of things for our clients.
Great. And I understand that the Classic team have had some success helping clients with those reviews. Do you want to take us through an example?
Yeah, so look, we had one recently and it was up for a refusal. We then got in contact with the client, and whilst we acknowledge it must be incredibly traumatic to have to retell their story, sometimes we need to be able to do that. And we'll ask, with this instance, we asked the client a lot of questions and just kept asking questions after questions. And then they mentioned a name of someone that they recalled being involved in their life. And the solicitor that was taking that statement had also heard that name, and that it was a very unusual name, and it was someone who had worked for the AWB. So for us, we were able to complete the statement with the information that the AWB actually had been involved in that person's life because they had mentioned a very particular name. So sometimes it just can be that. There's lots of different ways that we can help.
Mm. Okay, well, I might bring you in now, Joshua. Did you want to mention any cases that you've assisted with the reviews?
Yeah, I guess just generally, sometimes people have this view that if they don't, if Aboriginal Affairs, if they do that search and they don't find any records, I would just encourage people not to see that as the end of the road, because people's experience and the statement that you can prepare with a client, that is evidence. And we know that the records that were kept are not perfect, and Aboriginal Affairs acknowledges that as well. And it's just kind of an obvious point that those records are not the be all and end all, and that somebody's experience is really valuable, and being able to put that evidence forward can be really persuasive evidence to persuade Aboriginal Affairs that somebody should receive a payment under the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme. But I'd also say that it becomes even stronger once you can connect it to other pieces of evidence, as Sue Ellen was saying. So as soon as you're able to get your client statement and match it up with any other contextual information that's available, then we're able to make really strong submissions on the client's behalf. And I've definitely had that experience of where Aboriginal Affairs have done a search, haven't been able to find any records for whatever reason, and have been able to prepare a statement with the client, and the client's been approved on the basis of the client's evidence in their statement.
Okay, thank you. Well, Josh, we'll now have a look at the other reparations options available.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'd emphasise is that what we've been talking about and what Sue Ellen has been describing is the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme, and that one of the big advantages of that path is that if Aboriginal Affairs go away and they do a search after you put in your application and they find records and they approve you for a payment, then it can be a relatively, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you don't need to tell your whole story, which can be really difficult for some clients. So that can be a really positive thing about this Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme. If they don't find records and the client decides that they do want to tell their story, then obviously you would still need to go into some of those memories, which can be really difficult for some clients. The other thing that I would emphasize with the Stolen Generations Reparation Scheme is that it is just for the act of removal. So it's not reparations for a lot of Stolen Generation survivors had a lot of horrible experiences after being removed. This doesn't intend to give reparations or for that. It is just for the act of being stolen or being removed from your family. One of the other ways that Stolen Generation survivors can sometimes get reparations or redress or compensation. These are all kind of words that have similar but different meanings, particular legal meanings, is the National Redress Scheme. And so if you were in an institution and suffered sexual abuse, then No More is a community legal centre that can give free confidential legal assistance, and their numbers on the slides there, that 1-800-605-762 number. That scheme is open until the 30th of June 2027, and No More is another holistic service. So I'd really encourage you, if you've had that experience, or if you have a client who's had that experience, to get in contact with No More on that number. The third way is to get advice and potentially assistance from a private law firm. And that would essentially be a personal injury claim for if a Stolen Generation survivor experienced harm after being removed. And so that could take the form of sexual abuse or other abuse. And it can take into account broader concepts as well, like loss of culture and loss of, loss of language and all of those kind of things can be brought into those personal injury claims as well. That we can connect you to private law firms that are specialists in this area, and they can give you the kind of expert advice and assistance that you need if you want to go down that path. So legal aid won't do that personal injury type of work, but we can connect you to people that do.
And is there a cost involved, Josh, with that private law firm work?
Yeah, so it will, as with any time you see a private lawyer, I think it's very important that you look very closely at any cost agreement and you make sure that you've understood it before you sign it. There's lots of private law firms that do work which is no win, no fee, which I think a lot of people have come across this idea of that you don't need to pay any fees unless they're successful. I believe there are also some private law firms in this space that will charge their fees separately to the government. So they do the work for you. They get, if they're successful in getting you compensation, you get the compensation, and they charge their fees separately to the government. So that's not taken off your compensation. But it is one of those things where it's good to, just to be very careful about what it says in the cost agreement and make sure you've understood it and that you're happy with it before you sign anything.
Okay. So thanks, Josh. So let's talk now about some of the issues that might come up after someone gets a reparations payment. And I think we'll start with Centrelink.
Yeah, so if you are a stolen generation survivor and you do receive a Centrelink benefit, basically the $75,000 payment won't be assessed as ordinary income by Centrelink. So they've made a decision about that. However, you must tell Centrelink of your change of financial circumstances, so the fact that you've received that money within 14 days. And so if you keep that payment in your bank account and that starts generating interest, or if you decide to invest it and it is generating a return for you, then that income would be deemed to be income for the purposes of Centrelink, and your Centrelink payment may reduce accordingly. We're not specialists in this area, so it's very important that you speak to a financial counsellor or a financial advisor, or there is also the the Australian Tax Office's Indigenous Helpline would be a really good point of call as well. That's 1310 80 is their number. And the other thing to remember is if you receive reparations and you give it away to somebody else, and obviously after you receive reparations, it is completely up to you what you want to do. If you give it away, then the person that you give it to, they may not have the same protections that you do as the person who has received the reparations directly. So it may be counted as income for them, or it may affect their situation, and they might want to get some advice, or both of you may want to get some advice first before gifting it, just so you understand what the consequences are.
Can the Class Act lawyers can make those referrals, I guess, if they're working with a client?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We link in with quite a few financial counsellors as well.
Okay, great. All right, so Josh, what about their housing, if they're in social housing?
Yeah, so once again, a decision has been made by the government department that it will not affect housing means assessment. So if somebody is in social housing and they receive a reparations payment, it won't be affected. Yeah, so that's good news.
And that includes public, community and Aboriginal housing by the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And Aboriginal Affairs have a fact sheet about Centrelink housing, and also our next topic about fines and other debts, which people can get a hold of and is included in the email that follows this webinar. So what about fines and debts, Josh?
Yeah, so it's, I guess one of the themes that we've been talking about in this session is please come and see us quickly, because the scheme is ending on the 30th of June next year, which we know is going to come very quickly. And so, that's one of our key messages that we want to keep reminding people is please spread the word and please get people to come and see us. And the sooner that people come and see us, the sooner we can help them to apply to the scheme. And similarly, I would say that if people have fines or debts, it is always good to try and resolve those issues as early as possible. So reach out to Classic and get assistance with those early. In this particular situation, if somebody applies for a Stolen Generations Reparation Scheme payment and they're successful, it's really important that you can resolve those fines or loans early, just because it makes everything simpler later on. We don't want to have a situation where somebody receives this reparations as recognition for what they've been through, and within a short period of time, maybe they've had a pre-existing loan for a car loan or something, and all of a sudden, a few days later, that the loan company has realized that they've had a lot of money coming into their bank account, and that they have managed to get a garnishee order or something like that, basically an order from the court that they're able to take that money out. So it's really good if we can speak to clients first, do a legal health check, find out what, if there's any other legal issues that our clients have, and try to resolve them before the client gets the reparations payment. And that's something that we really think is important, and we're really happy to do with clients. The other thing I would say with fines, restitution orders, is that generally we should be able to get Revenue New South Wales to agree not to touch your reparations payment. And indeed, we may be able to get your fines waived depending on your situation.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, and then there's also help to prepare a will that you can assist with.
Yeah, so it's if you contact us, we can connect you to the Law Society, and they have a program where they're assisting Stolen Generations members to get free wills or at a reduced cost or substantially reduced cost. So yeah, I'd just encourage everyone generally that it's a really important thing to have a will, just so it's clear what you want to have happen. But particularly if you're receiving a reparations payment and this is a large amount of money, it's obviously it's important to make your wishes clear through a will. And you can also express your wishes around other things like what you would like to have happen after you pass, and that can make it easier for your family as well, so they know what your wishes are.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, and we've got this slide coming up about speak to a financial counsellor.
Yeah, so I guess we've already kind of covered that, but it's just, I think it is a really important step. Really, really good to talk with somebody about what any issues that you're worried about in terms of your finances, or if you wanted any to talk about budgeting, or if you wanted to talk about planning, even to just have a bit of a chat about if somebody is successful under the reparation scheme or otherwise. It can just be a great free tool that we have in New South Wales to get some assistance with any money problems that we're having. And their number is 1-800-007-007. And can also look at getting a financial advisor as well. So if you go on the Money Smart website, you can look up and find a financial advisor if you're wanting advice around what to do with any reparations payment that you receive. But as I've said previously, it's up to people what they want to do. This is something to recognise what people have experienced, and you can choose what you wish to do.
Yes, and it's good to know there's services around to help them understand these financial issues as well. Okay, so Josh, take us through the range of organisations that are available to provide support to Stolen Generations survivors.
Yeah, so I guess I might just start from the bottom. Is that I think from speaking to some of my Stolen Generations clients, the one thing that they've shared with me is that it can be really important to yeah, when you're talking about healing, it can be really helpful to be with people who've had similar experiences to you, and it can be really hard to go through that healing journey unless you're doing it with people that can really understand what you're going through. So those Stolen Generations organisations that are listed there for Kinchela and Cootamundra and I think that can be a really good path for some people. The other point that I'd say is that it's often quite personal around what helps with healing, and there might be particular family members or particular friends that people find helpful. And then there's also services out there that can help as well. One of them that we put there is Wattle Place, which is run by Relationships Australia, and they provide support services specifically for forgotten Australians, anyone who experienced institutional or other out-of-home care as children, Stolen Generations survivors. Yeah, and they can also assist people seeking support with understanding the National Redress Scheme. And Classic can make these referrals as well. So if you just connect clients to Classic, really keen on providing that holistic service. The other point that we've got there is around Link Up. We can definitely make that referral as well, and that can be helpful in helping people to reconnect, reunite with family members. And there's also Link Up counsellors, local Aboriginal medical service, emotional wellbeing officers at those Aboriginal medical services, bringing them home workers. These are all different referral options that we can explore with our clients depending on what their wishes are and what they would like.
Okay, thank you. So, well, thanks very much, Sue Ellen, for sharing all your wonderful information with our webinar participants today. So what we've got up on the slide now are the contact details for the Civil Law Service for Aboriginal Communities, the Legal Aid New South Wales service. So there's the phone number, 1800 793 017, and if you need the assistance of the National Relay Service, you can use that as well. And there's an email address, clsac@legalaid.newsouthwales.gov.au, and the Classic service also has a page on the Legal Aid New South Wales website. So those contact details are there if you want to make a referral to us. So I think that's the end of our webinar. So there's just a few questions I might just go through with you both before we finish off. So one of the questions is, are there avenues for people who are adopted and not placed in an institution? Do you want to answer that, Sue Ellen?
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the reason for the adoption. So if that person may have actually been removed sometimes at birth or sometimes later because of Aborigines Welfare Board involvement in their life, they actually may be eligible for the scheme. So we would encourage them to be in contact with either us or a CLC to talk that through. And we would normally in that instance get the adoption records and just see what was in there to see whether we can make them eligible for it.
Okay, thank you. And so the next question is, what about people who were taken away but not stolen generations? So they experienced lots of foster homes and were forced to move away from their area interstate, like moved away from their culture. Are they eligible for any compensation or reparations, Sue Ellen?
Yeah, look, it's going, I do feel a bit terrible saying it depends, but it really does on that person's situation. And one thing we have seen is that every person's journey has been very, very different. And in that sort of instance, you would definitely be getting every document you could on that person and trawling through everything to see what you can find in there. That's for the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme. Depending, unfortunately, what happened to them in that foster care, whether it was in New South Wales or in other states, you would maybe encourage them to speak to a private lawyer and see what there might be in that, or a referral through to Know More as well.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, can survivors apply for redress through No More and also apply for additional compensation for sexual abuse through a private law firm? Sue Ellen, do you know?
Yes, yeah, sure. So the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme, as Josh had said, is for the act of removal. Very different to the National Redress Scheme. So a client could be eligible for both. It does, depend on each situation, what happened to them whilst they were in out-of-home care or through the foster care system. So yeah,
And what
it would be.
and what about a civil claim? Can that also be added to that?
So with that, it does get a little complicated. Sometimes with a redress scheme, if you make an application for redress and accept it, generally you will not be able to make a civil claim. But sometimes if you've made a civil claim, you may also be able to make an application for the redress. But again, I would really encourage you to speak to the experts in this, and that's No More, the legal service there.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So Josh, our last question, do you have advice for raising the scheme with clients?
Yeah, I guess we have lots of different resources, including posters, and we've also got kind of, yeah, little publications like little fact sheets and postcards. And so I guess if you're a community worker out there and you're really wanting to get the word out there, having the poster up there on the wall and having the postcards and the fact sheet there on your front desk, that can be just like a simple conversation starter that some clients may ask you based on the poster or the resources that you've got there. It can also be, I think it's good to, if you've got a relationship with a client and you're working with them, I think most people would like to have the option. So even if you say to them, look, I don't know if you've heard about the Stolen Generations Reparation Scheme, but would you like to hear more about it? I think that you can raise it in a fairly direct but gentle way where clients will be happy to have that conversation with you. And if they don't want to pursue it any further, that's fine, obviously. But I do think it's important that clients have the option, because for some clients, it's incredibly meaningful to get, you get not only the reparations themselves, the financial, but also the apology can be very meaningful for some clients. So it is good to spread the word as much as you can, but do it in that kind of gentle, respectful way, as I'm sure everybody does.
Okay, well, that's a great point to end our webinar on. So thanks very much, Sue Ellen and Josh, for your time today and sharing your amazing knowledge about the Stolen Generations Reparations Scheme with our audience. So remember, everyone, that the scheme ends on 30 June 2022, so that's next year. So we really need everyone who's eligible to hear about the scheme and put in an application so they don't miss out. Just a reminder to everyone that there'll be a link to give us some feedback after this webinar, and an email which has links to the resources that we've talked about today. If you're watching this as a recording and you have any questions or would like those resources, send us an email to the CLE team at Legal Aid New South Wales. It's on the screen now, which is cle@legalaid.newsouthwales.gov.au. And we look forward to welcoming you all to our next Law for Community Workers webinar. So I'll say bye for now. Bye, Sue Ellen.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Josh.